The top 10 albums of January find us returning from a short break, finding that music has not let up. In the meantime, there's a lot to cover. There's a lot of great records coming out, and there's just no shortage of enthusiasm here leading into 2025. I will say that I greatly appreciate a lot of the kindness and generosity of people who showed up around the top 50 of the year, and I appreciate the conversations that some of that spawned. And I always appreciate when people are communicative and kind and intelligent in their interactions. I think that's something that is very rare to come across anywhere on the internet, and I appreciate there are people who not only pay attention to what I do at all, but want to talk about it once in a while and have something to say, even in passing. So at number 10, we have Jonathan Hultén's Eyes of the Living Night. This is the sophomore full-length album from the artist. It is a solo record, of course, and it is one that is just particularly sentimental to me this month. And I think that that counted for a lot, and I figured I'd give it its due for that function that it served. Otherwise, I was just overall completely impressed how much that the artist had grown beyond their first record, and I think the way they presented the second one is very representative of really being right on the brink of greatness and finding a voice that is much stronger than anything I thought was possible after that debut.
With every day going on repeat, running yet stuck in an endless wheel, again going.
At number 9, we have Concrete Icon's Voracious Streams. This is a death metal record. It's a great death metal record. They blast through the whole thing. They've got a lot of riffs, and I feel like that's all you need to know about it. It is a Finnish death metal band, and there are a lot of more straightforward Finnish death metal records coming out of late. But I think this is one that feels like it has some real care put into it. And a taste for classic old school death metal that it stands out. And not only because they've got tons of riffs, because they kind of mix it up throughout this record. At number 8, we have Necromaniac's Sciomancy, Malediction, and Rites Abominable. Now, we've been waiting a while for this band to kind of put together their full length, and it's interesting. This is maybe much more atmospheric and more black metal oriented than expected. It isn't just a straight death thrash metal record in an old school style, and it feels like they've been listening to Negative Plane in terms of their song arrangements. And what I mean is that they're a little bit more challenging, they're a little bit more layered, and their presentation is a little bit more elaborate. There's a bombast to it that goes as far as to use like floor toms and things like that to make it sound, bigger and more evocative in its presentation. And I appreciated that it just wasn't another record. It felt like they put a lot of care into making this an event and something that's not just more of the same.
As he who goes the cemetery gates until the end of time, until the end of days. Tonight.
Uppsala, Sweden-based doom metal band Acolytes of Moros really stand out here at number 7 with Spear of Adversity. This is a doom metal band, of course, but one that has put like 4 songs into an hour-and-a-half record. It's a double LP. It's this huge thing, and all of it is great. It actually stood out to me much more than their past work, which kind of relied a little bit too much on a Reverend Bizarre feeling tonality and kind of gusto to the lyrics. And this feels like it's their own thing. It's darker. It's got some extreme metal influences. It's very immersive to the point where I was just kind of addicted to just sitting with this record and soaking up the darkness that it was intentionally putting out there. So well above average stuff. Really strong album. Number 6, we have Membaris' Black Plasma Armor. This is a black metal band from Germany, and it's related to Porta Nigra, if you remember them. It's kind of a progressive, different kind of black metal band, and this is something that was a little bit more raw and frantic, and often compared with early Orthodox black metal in some sense. That's not exactly what I heard in this newer record. This is something that is a little bit more modern in the sense that it has very strong presentation and production values. It is exceedingly melodic in a lot lot of points. It is declarative and commanding in its vocals. There's a lot to really like about the way they developed these songs, and I felt like a really strong connection with the way that they presented those darker and more declarative moments. It's not a point. It's not a matter of just being catchy or resembling melodic black metal in that sense, but that is there, and there are reasons to return to this record. Which I like the way that they felt like they pushed it over the top with this record. Where Obscurity Sways is the third full-length album from Russian death metal band Pyre. These guys started out in a very different place, worshipping classic Swedish death metal, and I mean the earlier stuff like Nihilist and whatnot, where it was clear there was still some thrash metal in their interest, and they were kind of going for it in that way, but also over the years they've added in something closer to Asphyx or Pestilence in terms of taking that thrashing side and moving it into those more pummeling grooves, and also a more Van Drunen-esque vocal styling. Where do they, what's so special about that, right? We've heard that a million times. It's really in the delivery and the riffs. The riffs are a huge part of it. This is an inventive band that are really solid at putting together riff craft, but also their presentation is particularly attentive to old school death metal details, and not just in the riffs, but in the rhythms and their voicing. To me, within the strife. At number 4, we have Relics of Humanity's Absolute Dismal Domain. This is a Belarusian band, and one that they've been around for a while in the brutal death metal peripheral, and have pulled together a particularly strong concept album here with Absolute Dismal Domain. It kind of surprised me that this was anything more than kind of a bash through. There's a brilliant presentation there in terms of the way that they've concocted their own unique sound design, and the way they worked in a lot of different pacing to represent this concept of the absolute dark, of the heat death of the universe. It essentially is what they're going through. It just stood out to me. It's the kind of record I want to buy and just flip through it and listen to it 1,000 times. It just appealed to me right away, and it continues to. I think it's a very strong record. Eschaton Magics is the second full-length album from Oslo, Norway-based black metal band Nachash. And I would say this is kind of an evil heavy metal record. What I mean is that it resembles 80s extreme metal, which is kind of indifferent to both black metal and death metal specificity. It doesn't sound exactly like Master's Hammer or even Mortuary Drape, but it is closer to the latter in terms of having a lot of speed metal and thrash metal in its initial voicing, positing a more extreme vision beyond bands like Venom and Slayer, while taking it to a darker, more occult place. And this is very different from their debut, which was more influenced by epic heavy metal. It had a lot more of a kind of a Varathron-esque trample to some of its riffs and movement. And this is a different type of record. I really liked that I couldn't define the record in any certain way as I listened to it, and it felt like it helped kind of characterize the experience. And it just kind of fit into my taste as well. The debut full-length album from Stockholm, Sweden-based heavy metal band Century was one of my favorite records in years prior, and now Sign of the Storm comes back and kind of repeats the process. This is maybe a little bit more of an anthemic record. For some it will be more immediately catchy. For me it was not as classic feeling as the first one. This has a little bit more of a sweetness and a polished production to it. Overall it's just a great heavy metal record. It's memorable. It's got a lot of great lyrics in there. There's a lot of power behind their playing. It's kind of that new wave of British heavy metal meets classic Swedish heavy metal idea, coming across loud and clear once again, and they've done a great job with this record, as with the last.
Give me a sign, show me the way, come out on the light. This is my night.
as far as music that actually meant anything to me over the last month, I think Barshasketh really touched upon the most depth in terms of not only their lyrical exploration, but music that was exciting. It was fanatical. It was introspective. It's performative. There's nothing but great things happening on this record, nothing but dark and deeply cut ravines into their process of black metal in the way that it speaks to both spiritual and just intellectual interests. And I think that's kind of the peak of where a lot of black metal can go anymore. And I think that this is a especially fine example of where the riff can take you and where classicism can help boost in a lot of those dissonant ideas. And I think the fusion of it all really speaks to the best from this band. It's also a little bit easier to take in. It's a little bit shorter than the previous record, and I found myself listening to it more often because of that. It was the perfect size record at the perfect time, and one that had a lot of depth the more I looked into it. Easily, I would say the album of the month for my own taste, and one that I'll be listening to all year.
So go